When I came home for spring break, the house felt quieter than I remembered. Not empty, just still, like it was holding its breath. My mom had left that morning for a week-long work trip in Chicago. I found her goodbye note on the kitchen counter, neatly folded beside a steaming travel mug of coffee she hadn't finished. David was already outside when I arrived, sanding something on the back porch. I watched him through the window for a moment, his sleeves rolled up, sawdust catching the morning light as it floated through the air. He moved with a quiet precision, each stroke of the sanding block careful, deliberate. That was always his way. Steady. Contained. We'd never been close, not in the 3 years he'd been married to my mother. He was kind, sure, brought flowers on holidays, remembered my birthday, but we mostly orbited each other. There wasn't animosity, just distance. He looked up when I slid the back door open. "You're early," he said, offering a small smile. I shrugged. Bus got in ahead of schedule. He nodded, then gestured to the frame he was working on. "Kitchen shelves. Your mom's been hinting at them for months. She'll be thrilled." We stood there for a second, the silence stretching out between us like a fine thread, taut and waiting to snap. Then, he reached into a small cooler and pulled out a bottle of iced tea, handing it to me. I took it without a word. Later that afternoon, I found myself lingering in the kitchen as he worked in the garage. The rhythmic hum of his tools filled the background, oddly comforting. I started sketching at the table, something I hadn't done in months. The lines came easy, so did the subject. I was halfway through a rough portrait of his profile before I realized what I was doing. That evening, we ate dinner in companionable silence. The clink of cutlery and the low hum of a jazz playlist filled the room. It was David who broke the quiet first. "You still drawing?" he asked. I looked up, surprised. "Not really. I've been too busy with classes." He nodded slowly, then said, "You were good." I always thought that. I didn't know how to respond. It was such a simple thing, a passing comment. But coming from him, it settled deeper than I expected. After dinner, I cleaned up while he disappeared into the garage again. When I passed by later, the door was ajar. He stood there, lit by the soft yellow of the overhead lamp, staring at the sketch I'd left on the kitchen table. He didn't say anything when he noticed me watching. Just looked at me, something unreadable in his eyes. That was the moment I knew something had changed. And I wasn't sure if I wanted it to stop. The next morning, the sky was overcast, and rain tapped softly against the windows like a metronome, setting a rhythm to the stillness that settled over the house. I found David already in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. The smell of butter and syrup clung to the air, warm and unexpected. "You didn't have to cook," I said, brushing sleep from my eyes. He didn't look at me. "Figured you might be hungry." I hesitated before sitting at the counter. "Thanks." He slid a plate in front of me, then poured coffee into the mug I always used when I was younger. The one with the cracked handle and fading constellation print. He remembered. We ate mostly in silence, though it wasn't awkward this time. It was easy, comfortable. But beneath the calm, something buzzed quietly between us, like electricity in the walls, unseen, but undeniably there. By the third day, we had fallen into an unspoken rhythm. I helped him organize the garage, handing him tools while he explained the names and purposes of each one. He wasn't much of a talker, but when he did speak, his voice was low and deliberate, like every word had been weighed before it passed his lips. "You always this quiet?" I asked once, teasing. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Only when I don't know what to say." I caught myself watching him when he wasn't looking, his hands, his jaw when he was focused, the way he'd pause mid-thought, lost in something I couldn't see. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed those things. It was just the first time I let myself linger. That evening, the power flickered during dinner. The rain had turned into a steady downpour. Thunder rolled low in the distance. "Storm's picking up," he said, glancing toward the window. "Guess we're stuck inside," I murmured. After cleaning up, I curled into the corner of the couch with a blanket and a book I wasn't really reading. David sat across from me, flipping through a woodworking catalogue. The room glowed with the soft, amber light of a single lamp. The quiet was thick, comfortable and dangerous all at once. You miss school? He asked suddenly, eyes still on the page. Sometimes. But not really. It's noisy there. Feels like everyone's always trying to prove something. He nodded, thoughtful. You never had to prove anything to me. That landed heavier than I expected. I looked up, and his gaze met mine, steady and unreadable. For a second, I didn't look away. And neither did he. The air between us changed, thicker, slower. My heartbeat felt too loud. I stood, muttering something about getting tea. My hands trembled slightly as I filled the kettle. From the living room, he spoke again, so softly I almost missed it. I see you, Lena. You know that, right? I didn't answer. But I wanted to. And that scared me more than anything. The storm arrived just after midnight. Wind howled through the trees, and the house shuddered with every gust. When the lights flickered and went out, I sat up in bed, blinking into the darkness. The silence that followed was absolute. No hum of appliances, no glow of streetlights, only rain tapping on the roof like restless fingers. I found David downstairs, lighting candles in the living room. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering like memories. Couldn't sleep? He asked without turning. I shook my head. The wind. He nodded, setting down a candle on the coffee table. I figured. It's loud. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of the thinness of my t-shirt. The room felt colder, or maybe it was just my nerves. Want some tea? He offered. There's no power. He smiled faintly. Gas stove still works. In the soft glow of candlelight, we sat across from each other on the floor, our mugs warming our hands. I watched the flame reflect in his eyes, the creases at the corners deepening when he smiled. Something about the darkness made everything feel closer, more honest. He reached for the sketchbook I'd left on the floor beside the couch. Flipping through it slowly, he stopped on the half-finished portrait of him. This is good, he said, voice low. You captured something. I wasn't sure you'd see it, I admitted. I did. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of things we hadn't said. I looked at him, really looked, and saw it mirrored in his expression. Hesitation, longing, fear. I've been trying not to say something I shouldn't, I whispered. He set the sketchbook down gently. Me too. The candle crackled softly between us. The world outside disappeared, just wind, rain, and the fragile space we occupied. My voice trembled. I don't know if this is wrong, but it doesn't feel that way. He reached for my hand. His touch was tentative, careful, as if he expected me to pull away. I didn't. I've thought about you, he said, barely above a breath. More than I should. Our hands stayed linked, resting between us like a secret too delicate to speak aloud. Then, slowly, almost cautiously, I leaned forward. He met me halfway. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was soft, uncertain, full of everything we hadn't dared admit. When we pulled apart, our foreheads stayed close. We can't, he began, but didn't finish. I know, I said, voice barely a whisper. But I wanted to. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We sat in the candlelit quiet, hearts unsteady, hands still joined. Something had broken that night, not violently, but gently. Like a seam quietly splitting apart to reveal what had been underneath all along. And we both knew, nothing would be the same again. When I opened my eyes, the storm had passed. Sunlight crept cautiously through the curtains, casting long golden stripes across the floor. The living room was still, the candles had burned low, the air smelled faintly of melted wax and rain. David sat in the armchair, awake but unmoving, his gaze lost in the soft light. I didn't know how long he'd been sitting like that. My fingers still tingled from where they'd held his the night before. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence had changed, no longer uncertain, but heavy with consequence. I didn't sleep, he finally said, voice hoarse. I figured. I sat up slowly, the blanket falling from my shoulders. My chest ached, not from regret, but from the fragile uncertainty that clung to everything now. About last night, I began. He met my eyes, and for a second, I saw something flicker there: fear, guilt, tenderness. Maybe all of it. I won't pretend it didn't happen, he said carefully. But I won't cross that line again. I nodded. I understand. But understanding didn't make it easier. We moved around each other for the rest of the morning like dancers in a routine neither of us had rehearsed: deliberate, distant, quiet. He brewed coffee. I packed my sketchbook. Every gesture felt layered, charged, as if touching too long would tear the fabric we'd just barely stitched back together. When my mom returned that evening, she filled the house with chatter, stories from the conference, questions about my week. I smiled, answered, helped with her luggage. She didn't notice the difference in the air. Or maybe she did and chose not to name it. David barely spoke. He hugged her gently, then excused himself to the garage. When I passed by the open door later, I saw him at his workbench, sanding a small box, his back tense. We didn't talk again until I was packing for the return to campus. He knocked lightly on my door, then stepped inside without waiting. "I wanted to give you something," he said. He handed me a small wooden box. Smooth, polished, warm to the touch. Inside were the drawing pencils he'd left by my mug that morning days ago, now sharpened, arranged carefully. "I thought you might want to keep creating," he said. I swallowed hard. "Thank you." He started to turn, then paused. "I meant what I said. I see you, Lena. Even if nothing comes of this. I want you to know that." I held the box tighter. "I see you too." He nodded once, then left. As I sat on the edge of my bed, I looked down at the gift in my lap. Simple. Meaningful. Quiet. Just like him. Maybe that week would remain a secret stitched into the fabric of my life. Or maybe, one day, our story would continue in some unexpected way. All I knew for certain was this. Some moments change you quietly. And you never go back to who you were before.